When a hostile takeover is on the table, you expect corporate sharks, not your own leadership serving you on a silver platter to a neighboring superpower. Aunt Tang Ji and niece Tang Yao gathered the Tang tribe's clan chiefs, a pack of parasites grown fat on their people's suffering. The chiefs, expecting another gift from the Han tribe, walked into a reckoning. Their pathetic attempt at a coup was met not just with a rebuttal, but with the sudden, terrifying appearance of the Han leader's personal guard, who had been secretly protecting his fiancée all along. Checkmate. With the worst offenders dragged away to face a public trial by the very people they starved, Tang Yao unveiled her husband-to-be's grand strategy. A slow, three-step absorption of the entire tribe, starting with the irresistible promise of complete Hanization. Luo Chong, playing 5D chess from across the map, proved that the most effective conquest isn't waged with swords, but with the promise of a better life, land distribution, and the public humiliation of one's oppressors. A masterful, bloodless victory was already in his grasp. The changing of the guard in the Tang tribe went smoother than anyone could have imagined. Tang Yao, the newly minted female chieftain, had barely warmed her seat before issuing a decree for total Hanization. Immediately, the clan chiefs from the 8 commanderies and 27 counties under the Tang tribe's jurisdiction, each escorted by brawny men of the Tiger Stripe Guard and a team of specialists from the governance work group, departed for their assigned regions in a grand procession. Their agenda was clear: paint walls and post slogans to promote the new policies, dismantle old temples and erect government offices to establish a new order, and finally, the most crucial task, compile household registers, recording every family's name, population, landholdings, and properties in meticulous ledgers. Who cared if the Tang tribe was run by a Tang or a Wang? Once the Han tribe's yellow registers were in hand and tax collection was taken over, what was the difference between this and their own backyard? In a flash, letters from the south flooded Luo Chong's study like a snowstorm. Tang Yao wrote personally to report on her progress. Dahai, from Tuahai Commandery, was a man of his word, sending 1 letter a day, rain or shine, with unwavering punctuality. Xuetu, who had already moved his troops in, acted as a war correspondent, summarizing the public sentiment and the progress of Hanization from all 8 commanderies daily. Everything was proceeding according to plan, steady as a rock. Far away in Hanyang Commandery, Luo Chong simply took a calm sip of tea as he perused these letters. With a flick of his vermilion brush, he wrote just 8 words: proceed as planned. Maintain close surveillance. Not a single wasted word. First, this had all been calculated long ago. A peaceful evolution was small potatoes. The Tang tribe wasn't a tough nut to crack like the Xian tribe. As long as the sugar-coated bullets were delivered properly, their complete assimilation was well within reach. Second, he was genuinely swamped. In his own courtyard, his 2 wives, Xiaodai and Zhaning, were both heavily pregnant, their second children due any day. After dealing with the great affairs of the world, Luo Chong still had to worry about his wives and children. Not to mention, he had 2 3-year-old terrors at home, little Luo Cheng and little Luo Lan. At this very moment, a heartwarming, chaotic scene of fatherly love and filial piety was unfolding in Luo Chong's study. The 2 little ones sat side by side at the desk, tiny hands clutching pencils, battling with the pinyin alphabet 1 stroke at a time, muttering to themselves. Luo Chong sat opposite them, flipping through the memorials sent from various regions while remaining ever ready to correct his children's pronunciation. Outside the study, under the garden pavilion, Xiaodai and Zhaning were leisurely eating the first purple grapes of the year. The sweet fragrance of the fruit and their light laughter drifted into the room. Luo Chong first replied to the letters from Tuahai Commandery and the Tang tribe. His instruction to Dahai was full cooperation. Give her whatever men and materials she needs. Tuahai Commandery was the anchor the Han tribe had planted in the south. Previously, the entire Cheongzhou Island had been conquered using this place as a springboard. Now, Tuahai served as the main logistics base for integrating the Tang tribe, and it would continue to serve that role for the future development of the capital. Luo Chong had absolute confidence in leaving this southern hub in Dahai's hands. His old brother Dahai might not be a strategic genius, but his greatest strength was his steadfastness. He completed his assigned tasks to standard, meeting both quality and quantity, never faltering and never complaining. A man like that was invaluable. His reply to Tang Yao was much warmer. Luo Chong told her to take care of herself in the south and not to overwork. Once the situation stabilized, she could return to Hanyang Commandery at any time. With Dahai handling civil matters and Xuetu handling the military, the south was secure. Nothing could go wrong. Finally, there was Xuetu's report. And this was where things got interesting. It was a living, breathing human comedy. The report stated that the few oblivious clan chiefs from Longxi Commandery had already been rounded up and arrested. When the Han tribe soldiers and the work group entered and announced to the common folk, fellow villagers, the sky has changed for the Tang tribe. Our new chieftain is leading us toward Hanization to distribute land and houses. Immediately, the soldiers raided the homes of those chiefs, carrying out box after box of the wealth they had squeezed from the people by selling tree gum, and distributed it to the cheering crowd amidst the clinking of coins. The weaving looms they had previously forced upon the people through strong-arm sales, along with the tyrannical contracts for 3 years of free labor, were publicly torn to shreds and burned by the newly appointed county magistrate. The common people stared in disbelief, then erupted into a deafening roar of cheers. My heavens! This was like getting a huge windfall and a weaving loom for free, with tangible benefits in their pockets. Who cared about the fate of the old chiefs? They deserved it. The new magistrate struck while the iron was hot, promoting locals to be village elders and ward heads, playing the locals managing locals card. The influence of the old chiefs vanished overnight. If Longxi Commandery was smooth, then Jinpu Commandery was a textbook example of welcoming a righteous army with food and drink. When the local people heard their clan chiefs had been arrested, not only was no one angry, but they grabbed their water gourds and rations, lining the roads to welcome the Tiger Stripe Guard. To the uninformed observer, it was as if a host of deities was descending from the heavens. The truth was, the chiefs of Jinpu Commandery had exploited the people so mercilessly, they were truly scum. When the people later heard that the new chieftain was Tang Yao, and that she planned to implement the Han tribe's policy of household registration and land distribution, they were so overjoyed they could barely contain themselves. If firecrackers had been invented, every household would have set off a string of welcoming red to celebrate. And what was the Han tribe's policy? Every adult man was guaranteed a minimum of 20 mu of land, which had to be used for growing grain. Good heavens! If this had been offered sooner, who would have willingly been forced by those damn chiefs to plant useless sorghum on the most fertile land? Was that something a human being would do? And so, the moment the Jinpu Commandery government office hung its plaque, the people's cooperation was overwhelmingly enthusiastic. They registered for identification cards when asked, allowed their fields to be measured when asked. They did whatever they were told, more obedient than their own sons. The work group was effective, too. With the initial land data in hand, they immediately organized the restoration of production. Fields that could be converted to paddies were planted with rice seedlings at once. Those that couldn't were rotated with soybeans, corn, and wheat. Nothing else mattered. The first priority was to fill the people's granaries. As the saying goes, with grain in hand, the heart is at ease. To stabilize the people's hearts, nothing worked better than golden, gleaming grain. Although other parts of the Tang tribe weren't quite as dramatic, with Chieftain Tang Yao's orders, the oversight of the Tiger Stripe Guard, and the ideological guidance of the work groups, the process of total Hanization was progressing splendidly. The smooth transition was also thanks to the Han tribe keeping its promises. While it was impossible to let the old clan chiefs remain in power, they were guaranteed lives of wealth and luxury. During the household registration, any cooperating chief was symbolically granted a noble title. After all, they had contributed their entire clan's assets. A little sweetener was only right. A title meant a larger residence and more land. As long as they didn't court disaster and were content to be wealthy squires, a life of luxury was completely within reach. Some who wanted their sons and nephews to have official careers sent their family's most promising scions to the government offices to study. However, they had to start from the very bottom as scribes. First, they had to learn the Han language, then the Han characters. Those 2 tasks alone were enough to keep them occupied for a considerable time. They wouldn't master the basics for a year or 2. By the time they learned how to write a report, the opportunity would have long passed. Using this combination of carrot, stick, and delaying tactics, the Han tribe brought the old local powers to heel. After reading it all, Luo Chong nodded in satisfaction, penned the comment, "Good work, keep it up," and set the report down. The next document was from the Cross Sea Bridge construction site. It was a joint report, signed by all the heads of the engineering department. The content mainly reported on construction progress and material consumption, especially the shortfall of steel and cement, so that Luo Chong could coordinate production from the rear. This cement was a precious commodity. It had to be strictly protected from moisture. Once it touched water, it turned into a useless block of stone. Sent along with the letter were several dozen of the bridge's latest glamour shots. In the photos, 3 more sets of 6 magnificent piers had been added to the northern end of the bridge, standing like a giant's legs planted firmly in the sea. Workers stood atop the piers, erecting formwork to pour the bridge deck. Once these 3 sections were complete, the bridge's length would extend another 150 meters toward the heart of the sea. Although this was barely a drop in the bucket compared to the total length of over 20 kilometers, this visible progress was proof that no one's sweat was shed in vain. Looking at the photos, Chong couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. Though he felt the progress was as slow as a snail's crawl, considering the current technological conditions, he couldn't bring himself to rush them. Finally, he picked up his brush and wrote in his reply, "Voiceover, see that? This is what you call an overwhelmingly superior strategy. A big stick in one hand and land distribution in the other. Throughout history, this move has never failed. As long as you put meat in the common people's bowls, they'll beat drums and gongs to welcome not just a new leader, but a new heaven. As for the old nobles, give them an empty title, a bit of cash, and send their next generation to cram school for advanced studies. After a combo like that, what strength do they have left to resist?" Luo Chong's gambit is a textbook perfect example of an overt stratagem. The nib scratched across the paper, Luo Chong's reply crisp and decisive. "Building materials and supplies? Unlimited. File a report for whatever you need, and the rear will provide full support. I have only one demand: quality. This is our Han tribe's first cross-sea railway bridge. If anyone dares to cut corners, don't blame me for being ruthless. A slower pace is acceptable. Safety first." A guard acknowledged the order and swiftly dispatched the letter. Luo Chong stretched, leaned back in his chair, and began to go through the next pile of documents. These were progress reports on the national policy of the Strategic Reserve Initiative, in essence, reports on granary construction from various regions. The documents were piled as high as a small mountain, yet Luo Chong read them with great interest. The granaries were divided into 3 tiers. The highest tier was the strategic granaries under direct central control. These were the dragon's reverse scale. To touch them was death. Their contents were the key to the tribe's survival. The second tier consisted of the community granaries built by each commandery, managing the food reserves for their entire jurisdiction. The third tier was the county-level granaries, responsible for the daily purchase and sale of grain, like giant transfer stations. However, they also had a critical reserve threshold. If supplies fell below that line, the county magistrate's career would be on the line. Currently, the county and some community granaries were already in place, while the crucial strategic granaries were still under intense construction. Judging by the progress, they should be completed before the end of the year. By next spring, the People's Grain Reserve plan could officially begin. Luo Chong reviewed and approved them one by one. After finishing this daily regimen, he could finally catch his breath and check on his personal ventures. For instance, what was the current status of the 2 Striver-class locomotives being built concurrently in Xinfeng Commandery? And how far had the railway tracks on the mountain been laid? Just as he was wondering who to ask, a knock came from outside his study. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps made the 2 little heads, deep in their battle with the pinyin alphabet, snap up at once. "Chieftain, an urgent letter from the Northern Remnant Clan settlement." The guard's steady, powerful voice came from outside the door. "Oh, bring it in quickly." Without looking up, Luo Chong casually grabbed a discipline ruler and gave each of the little ones a light tap on the forehead. Thump, thump. It wasn't heavy, purely a warning. Little Luo Chong and Luo Lan stuck out their tongues before reluctantly turning their heads back, continuing to trace the letters with wandering minds. The guard entered, presenting a wax-sealed bamboo tube with both hands, and then retreated as silently as he had come. Luo Chong held the tube, his thumb rubbing the unique seal on the cap, confirming the wax was intact. It was indeed from the Northern Remnant clans. Crack! With a slight twist of his fingertips, he broke the seal and pulled out the letter inside. The so-called Northern Remnant clans were actually a force that his man, Yu Yi, had pulled together up north. The people in it were either survivors rescued from the jaws of cannibal tribes or those who had managed to escape on their own. Under the banner of avenging the dead and rescuing our brethren, Yu Yi had united this group into a single force, periodically raiding the cannibals' lairs or ambushing them for supplies. The snowball grew from a few hundred people to several thousand, and then to a population exceeding 10,000. At that point, Yu Yi, with his unorthodox background, could no longer handle it, and Luo Chong had to send professional administrators and supplies. That kid was just like his older brother Yu Fu, a wild horse that could never stand still, always preferring to run free in the wilds. Was this letter about another treasure he'd found, or was he crying poor and asking for more supplies? As the letter unfolded, Yu Ye's flamboyant handwriting leaped off the page. Luo Chong's eyes scanned 10 lines at a glance, a grin unconsciously spreading across his face. Incredible. The kid's recent activities were nothing short of spectacular. First, his primary mission, finding people. Yu Yi and his small teams had scoured the land with an almost supernatural knack for finding them. In a short time, the population of the northern camp had soared to nearly 30,000, and they had expanded to 4 settlements. His performance was simply staggering. Even better, he had truly hit the jackpot, finding a copper mine just over 100 kilometers from the camp, and it was accessible directly by waterway. Now, not only could they forge their own tools, but they no longer needed to request metal supplies from the tribe. They had also achieved self-sufficiency in food. Although their staples were still corn and soybeans, it was more than enough to fill their bellies. What was more impressive was that they had absorbed a tribe that knew how to raise sheep, acquiring a type of highland sheep. They were large with thick wool, solving the camp's 2 major problems of meat and clothing in one fell swoop. They had even found a substitute for draft animals, yaks. Though they couldn't plow fields, they were incredibly steady for pulling carts and carrying goods. The letter also mentioned an interesting tidbit. Near the Black Lake, Yi had hired a group of local tribesmen to dig asphalt for him, trading 1 basket of asphalt for 1 basket of grain, a simple and equitable trade. He had already stockpiled a full ship's worth and was preparing to head south to deliver it, asking in passing if there were any other local specialties Luo Chong needed him to bring. Next, Yi cautiously inquired in the letter if a portion of his people should be transported back to the tribe, asking if they could be received and how many would be appropriate. Reading this, Luo Chong's eyes took on a playful glint. Smart kid. At the end of the letter, as expected, was another request for support. But this time, Yi wasn't asking for grain or ironware, but specifically for cloth and cotton. The reason was sound. They had rescued and recruited too many new people this year, and wool production couldn't keep up. There was a massive shortfall in winter clothing and quilts. Finally, the most surprising item of all, Yi was asking him for a regular army unit. Of course, he wasn't foolish enough to directly ask for command authority. Yi explained it clearly in the letter. Skirmishes with the cannibal tribes were becoming more frequent and larger in scale. His militia, composed of hunters, was starting to be outmatched. Therefore, he requested that Luo Chong dispatch a formal garrison and a professional general to command it. He himself would absolutely not interfere with military command. Luo Chong put down the letter, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk as he sank into thought. This letter was less a report and more a weighty declaration of loyalty. He reported the discovery of the copper mine. If he had hidden it, with 30,000 people under his command, he could have easily declared himself king. But he hadn't. Proactively asking to relocate people was a move to weaken his own power, showing Luo Chong that he harbored no dissent. And this final request, asking for an army but not for the authority to command it, was the most humble posture he could take. Luo Chong was never worried about whether Yu wanted to rebel. He was worried that one day, the 30,000 followers who recognized only Yu would forcibly drape the yellow robe of kingship over his shoulders. When that day came, his hands would truly be tied. Voiceover, see? This is the game of power. Yu's letter is flawless, flexing his muscles while pledging loyalty, terrified of arousing his lord's suspicion. And on Luo Chong's side, looking at this delicious prize served up on a platter, he still has to weigh whether he'll choke on it. It's hard to be a leader, but it's even harder to be a commander in the field whose achievements threaten to overshadow his master. In this contest of wits, Yu is playing a master's game, but Luo Chong is already observing from the heavens. Luo Chong held the letter, his mind as clear as a mirror. If he were to declare, "I'm stepping down," would his underlings, all clamoring for titles and promotions, ever agree? They'd probably tie him to the chieftain's throne on the spot. His hands were tied. This Han tribe, however, was a child he had raised from scratch. If someone else wanted to snatch it away, they would have to contend with his blade first. The third point in Yu's letter, requesting troops but not command, was an even more cunning move. To put it plainly, he was baring his neck for Luo Chong's blade, all while murmuring, "Boss, see how loyal I am? Come and give me a pat on the head." An army stationed right beside him, yet with its command firmly in Luo Chong's hands. Besides fighting cannibals, couldn't it also turn its guns on its own people? The answer was, of course, yes. With this action, Yu was telling Luo Chong, "Boss, I've placed my life in your hands. Surely you can trust me now, right?" Luo Chong looked at the letter, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. That kid. He hadn't seen him in a few years, and he'd become so formal. Distant. They had definitely grown distant. Just to earn a measure of trust, he was resorting to courtly intrigue, one move after another. If it had been his hot-headed older brother, Yu Fu, he probably would have just beaten his chest and yelled, "If the boss doubts me, I'll die right here to prove my loyalty." However, to put Yu Yi at ease, and to put himself at ease, Luo Chong decided to grant all his requests. Supplies? Granted. Population? To be relocated. This wasn't out of distrust for Yu Yi. It was purely to lighten his load. The conditions up north were harsh, and supporting 30,000 people was an immense pressure. The Han tribe was in dire need of people. 30,000. Luo Chong would take 300,000 without blinking. Of course, he couldn't take them all in one go. It had to be done in stages. Luo Chong mulled it over. He would start by relocating 1,000 households as a trial. He had just sent 1,000 households to Cheongzhou Island at the beginning of the year, and this would fill that gap perfectly. Houses and fields were all ready. They could move in and settle seamlessly. 1,000 households amounted to about 4,000 people. Taking that small number from a pool of 30,000 would both relieve Yu Ye's burden and not cripple his operations. Perfect. As he thought, Luo Chong picked up his brush to write his reply to Yu Yi. After writing about the population, his thoughts turned to the asphalt. That open-air asphalt lake up north was, simply put, a natural oil field. For the current Han tribe, this technology was a bit too advanced. Drilling platforms? Oil refineries. Good heavens, they hadn't even mastered the steam engine yet. Jumping straight to the internal combustion engine was a leap so great it would pull a muscle. As for paving asphalt roads, an image formed in Luo Chong's mind. A group of tall horses with shiny new horseshoes, galloping on a brand new asphalt road, sparks flying. After a few runs, the horseshoes would be ruined. Forget it. Horse-drawn carts could stick to the dirt roads. For now, the most practical use for asphalt was waterproofing the seams of ship planks. The byproducts from the coking plant were sufficient for that purpose. There was no need to go to the trouble of mining it all the way from the north. Thus, Luo Chong wrote directly in the letter, "Just bring back that one ship of asphalt. Do not dig any more after that. As for the tribesmen digging it, you can handle them as you see fit. Absorb them if you can." Regarding supplies, cotton and cloth would be plentiful. He'd also send a batch of iron ingots for them to forge their own tools. They should stop mining the copper, too. It was time-consuming and laborious, and the resulting bronze tools were inferior to iron ones. He would simply trade iron ingots for all the bronze implements they had, which he could then use to mint coins. Finally, there was the matter of the army. Luo Chong had long had a blueprint for a dream unit in his mind, a force composed purely of firearms. Every man armed with a bolt-action rifle, firing in volleys. He'd like to see how those blood-drinking cannibals stood up to that. The weapon designs for this unit were already complete, just waiting for the order. Assembly would be quick. As long as the supply of weapons and ammunition was steady, they could be sent to the battlefield with minimal training. One garrison, 2,000 men. That would be enough. Using 2,000 modern light infantry to crush a group of primitive tribals, the firepower advantage would be exhilarating. At this thought, Luo Chong no longer hesitated. Chu Bing. He would have Chu Bing form this unit. At the end of the letter, Luo Chong's tone became non-negotiable. Immediately organize 1,000 households for migration. Along with that ship of asphalt, head south at once. Supplies will be sufficient, but cease mining the copper. Use the iron ingots I provide to trade for all the bronze implements in your possession. The army will arrive by the end of the year. At that time, a general appointed by me personally will lead you into a true war against the cannibals. Of course, Luo Chong wasn't a selfless saint. With a grand wave of his brush, he wrote his final demand on the letter. I will give you an army, but I want people. I want prisoners of war. I want slaves. The Cross-Sea Bridge, the Imperial Palace, the capital city, they were all short on free labor. Those cannibal scum were the best kind of concrete mixers. As long as you fed them, you could work them to death. No matter how one calculated it, this deal was an undeniable win. Swish, swish, swish. The reply was written in one go. Luo Chong blew the ink dry and shouted toward the door. Someone. Chieftain. A guard flashed into the room. Send this by Eagle Post to Yu Yi in the north immediately. Then, summon Chu Bing for me. Yes. The guard took his leave. Quiet returned to the study. Luo Chong paced to the weapon rack and took down a custom rifle. Its body is silvery gray and its stock made of white oak. The gun was cool and heavy in his hands, weighing over 8 pounds. He expertly worked the bolt, locking it open on an empty chamber. He aimed at a passing cloud outside the window and pulled the trigger. Click. Though there was no bullet, the crisp sound of the mechanism, the metallic feel of the action, it was the ultimate romance for a man. Voiceover, an overt stratagem. This is the pinnacle of an overt stratagem. Giving money, men, and guns, but keeping command firmly in his own hands. Not only does he solve the border threat, but he also neatly arranges for a future labor source. Yu Yi thinks he's playing on the 5th level, pledging his loyalty, little knowing that Luo Chong is already waiting for him in the stratosphere. In this game of wits spanning thousands of miles, Luo Chong was winning decisively from the very beginning. The custom Gur 98 in Luo Chong's hands was, in terms of sheer aesthetics, the Daniel Wu of the firearms world. It combined the best features of the Gur 98 and the Carabiner 98K, and was even improved to accommodate the primitive technology of this era. Its only drawback was the subpar steel. It couldn't be helped. Basic chemistry was practically non-existent. When you couldn't even complete the periodic table, what was the point of talking about high-performance alloys? That was just wishful thinking. A rifle made of this carbon steel would have its barrel twisted like a pretzel after firing 3,000 or 4,000 rounds, essentially rendering it scrap. Even if it could still fire, its accuracy would be left to fate. You'd have to ask Newton where the bullets went. Therefore, if the Han tribe wanted to establish a rifle corps, they had only one option: overwhelming numbers. If one rifle broke, it would be replaced without a second thought. Fortunately, they were only forming a 2,000-man unit this time. The tribe's resources could handle it. Knock, knock, knock. The study door was knocked on again. Come in. The door opened, and Chu Bing's face, glowing with excitement, peeked in. His eyes immediately fell on the rifle on Luo Chong's desk, its metallic surface gleaming coldly. His heart skipped a beat. My heavens! The chieftain summoned me. Could it be he's taking me shooting? Chieftain, you were looking for me. Chu Bing suppressed his inner ecstasy and performed a standard bow with clasped fists. Sit. Luo Chong gestured for him to sit down, then slowly settled back behind his desk. He placed the rifle on the table before looking up at Chu Bing. How's your family's photo studio doing lately? It's doing well. As soon as the conversation turned to his family business, Chu Bing's spirits lifted. It's not as popular as when it first opened, but following your advice, we've started selling small cameras and film, and we also take wedding photos. All in all, we're turning a steady profit. Luo Chong nodded. As long as it's profitable. That kind of business thrives on holidays. By the way, he changed the subject, throwing a completely unexpected fastball. How are things between you and your fiancé? Chu Bing was completely stumped by the question. The chieftain's conversational leaps were too fast. Why the sudden concern for his personal life? What, Luo Chong shot him an annoyed glance. I'm asking how you and your little wife-to-be are getting along. Oh, good, very good. Chu Bing scratched his head, grinning foolishly. The elders have already arranged the engagement, and we get along quite well. We're just waiting for the day to get married. Then don't wait. Luo Chong's words were stunning. I'll make an exception for you. Get married in the next couple of days. And then, consummate it immediately. What? Chu Bing nearly shot up from his chair, his face flushing crimson. Chieftain, we're not even of age yet. That's why I said I'll make the decision for you. Luo Chong wore an expression that screamed, I'm doing this for your own good. Hurry up, get married, consummate it, and leave a seed for your family. Leave a seed. Chu Bing's mind went blank with a buzz. Is he sending me to my death? But as his eyes swept over the rifle on the desk, a realization struck him like lightning. I get it. The Han tribe's recruitment policy had always been to only take able-bodied men who already had heirs. This was to ensure a family line would not be extinguished should a soldier fall in battle. The chieftain is going to war. At this thought, Chu Bing shot to his feet, standing ramrod straight. Yes, chieftain, I understand. Good that you understand. Luo Chong nodded in satisfaction. Time is tight. Go back and discuss this with your family now. I'll start recruitment tomorrow. In half a month at most, you need to get yourself back here and lead the troops. Yes, I guarantee I will complete the mission. Chu Bing was so excited he nearly vibrated. He gave a standard military salute, turned, and rushed out like a gust of wind. Watching his hurried retreat, Luo Chong couldn't help but smile. This kid was probably bursting at the seams, lusting after both his wife-to-be and a new gun. It made sense. The standard for adulthood in the Han tribe had been repeatedly raised. Chu Bing was 14 this year. In the past, he could have had a child old enough to run errands. After sending Chu Bing off, Luo Chong sat down again, spread out a sheet of paper, and began to draft the recruitment notice. The standards were the same as always: height, age, proof of heirs, criminal record. But this time, he specifically added vision and physical fitness tests. After all, these were riflemen. Every one of them had to be a sharpshooter. Poor eyesight was not an option. As for compensation, this new unit would carry the title of the Divine Strategy Guard, nominally the chieftain's personal army, the future Imperial Guard. This title alone made them far more prestigious than soldiers in other garrisons. The recruitment order was dispatched swiftly, covering all Han tribe territories except for the Tang tribe and Cheongzhou Island. Next, Luo Chong signed a series of orders. Commissioned 2 three-masted sailing ships to be converted into mobile armories, responsible for producing ammunition and repairing firearms. Order the Xinfeng Commandery Research Institute to mass-produce rifles and shotguns. In Luo Chong's Grand Winter Campaign plan, there was a seemingly minor, yet critically important detail. Sweaters. In an era without even long johns, a close-fitting, warm sweater was practically a walking furnace, its strategic value comparable to an AK-47. Unfortunately, Luo Chong didn't know how to knit. He vaguely remembered that his middle school textbook, that wonderfully eclectic volume called Physical Education and Labor, seemed to have illustrated instructions for various stitches. But back then, as a teenage boy, he was either wrestling with algebraic functions or burning off adolescent energy on the basketball court. Who had the time to study that? In those days, a boy who so much as glanced at a knitting needle risked being ridiculed by his classmates as a sissy. Fortunately, where there's a will, there's a way. Later, at the military academy, he had seen an instructor knit a scarf using needles as thick as chopsticks. He had watched for a moment out of pure curiosity and had unexpectedly memorized the simplest stockinette stitch. After all, knitting, in a sense, was an art of tying knots, a distant cousin to the tactical knot tying he had practiced. He wondered if he could still replicate that simple stitch now. If he could, the implications would be incredible. Sweaters, wool trousers, wool socks, wool gloves. The Divine Strategy Guard would be instantly transformed, becoming a special forces unit of the frozen north. If this project were scaled up, the entire population of the northern Han tribe would benefit. The scale of sheep farming on the grasslands could be expanded several times over, creating a complete industrial chain of wool spinning and dyeing. My heavens, this was a great undertaking that would benefit the nation and its people, and even generate vast wealth through trade. Dad, I finished my opinion. I want to go ride the little train. Dad, me too. Just as Luo Chong was mentally architecting a multi-billion-dollar wool textile empire, his 2 little troublemakers came running over, clutching their notebooks. All right, let me see. Luo Chong instantly switched from chieftain mode to father mode, taking the notebooks. Have you memorized the pinyin chart? Yes, yes. Little Luo Chong puffed out his chest, about to start with A-O-E. Little Luo Lan hid shyly behind her brother, clearly not having memorized it yet. Not bad. Luo Chong nodded in satisfaction, then said with a smile, Now, recite the multiplication table for me. Little Luo Chong. His head filled with question marks, his little brain nearly short-circuiting. Dad, you asked the wrong question. Little Luo Chong was so anxious, he shook Luo Chong's knee. It's pinyin, not the multiplication table. Ask again. All right. Recite whatever you know. If you get it right, I'll take you to ride the little train. While Luo Chong was enjoying this rare moment of familial interrogation, the recruitment order for the Divine Strategy Guard, carried on the wings of eagles, had flown to all corners of the Han tribe. Notices stamped with red seals were posted on every street and alley. When the common folk saw them, they were stunned. They were recruiting again, and this time, for the chieftain's personal guard. This was a momentous opportunity. For commoners, there was only one clear path to success: joining the army. Earn merit in battle, exchange it for a noble title, get promoted, make a fortune, and bring glory to your ancestors. Even if one were to fall on the battlefield, the pension and posthumous honors would benefit one's descendants for generations. It was a foolproof path to a better life. In an instant, a massive wave of enlistment fervor was ignited throughout the Han tribe. The 8 commanderies of Hanyang, as the capital region, were the first to receive the news. Weishan Commandery, Qianzhou County. Look, they're recruiting again. Really? Didn't they just recruit a while ago? Is there another war? There's a notice posted at the city gate. Let's go see. Hey, wait. There's one on this corner too. Who can read? Come and read it for everyone. A scholar wearing a skull cap was pushed forward by the crowd. He cleared his throat and read, word by word. Recruitment notice. To all people of the Han tribe. The northern cannibal tribes are growing increasingly rampant. To ensure the eternal peace of our tribe, the chieftain has established a special guard, the Divine Strategy Guard, to launch a northern expedition to quell the menace. We are hereby recruiting soldiers. Requirements. Male, aged 16 to 25, height between 1.65 and 1.9 meters, in good health, with excellent eyesight, no criminal record, and at least one child. Priority will be given to those with archery experience. Priority will be given to those who can speak Mandarin. Special note: applicants must undergo a unified physical examination and political review. The eyesight requirement is extremely high. You must be able to distinguish whether a person is male or female from 300 meters away. For this recruitment, Weishan Commandery has a quota of 200, with a limit of 40 for Qianzhou County. First come, first served. The deadline is in 3 days. Proclaimed by the official offices of the Han tribe, Weishan Commandery, and Qianzhou County. When the scholar finished reading, the surrounding crowd exploded. There were so many things to digest in this notice, it was hard to know where to start. First, they weren't afraid of war. They were afraid of fighting non-humans. Previous enemies, at least, had 2 legs and 1 head. With superior equipment, everyone was confident. But this time, the opponent was cannibals. Those 3-meter-tall, hairy, muscular monsters. Good heavens. It was one thing to shoot arrows down from the top of a city wall, but to take the initiative and go out into the wild to fight those things hand-to-hand? Who could handle that? At this thought, many had already decided to back out. Second, what on earth was that eyesight requirement? Seeing a person clearly from 300 meters away. That was absurd. At 300 meters, you'd be lucky to see a moving black dot. They weren't recruiting soldiers, they were recruiting eagles. Finally, and most perplexingly, was the quota. What the hell? Our county is only recruiting 40 people? You didn't misread that, did you? A young, strong man couldn't believe his ears. Exactly. Our entire Weishan Commandery has a population of over 40,000, and they're only recruiting 200? What for? That's barely anything. I didn't misread it. It's written in black and white, 40 people. The scholar confirmed again. In the crowd, a slightly older man slapped his thigh and grumbled, "What are you all worried about? Still hung up on the numbers? With that, see a person clearly from 300 meters condition. Forget 40 people. Even if they recruited without a limit, how many could possibly qualify?" That's true. As the crowd was discussing, the scholar from before suddenly had a flash of insight. I get it, he clapped his hands. Think about it. To deal with those kinds of monsters, close combat is definitely out of the question. So the only way is a long-range attack. And for a long-range attack, of course, the farther you can see, the better. Didn't you see it also says priority for those with archery experience? The chieftain isn't recruiting ordinary soldiers at all. He wants a group of master archers. Hearing this, the crowd nodded in unison, a wave of realization washing over them. Voiceover. A 300-meter vision test? This isn't a recruitment drive, it's an audition for a superhuman. Luo Chong has basically put his requirement for a physical cheat code right on the notice. It's foreseeable that in the next few days, business will be booming for ophthalmologists and telescope sellers, if they existed, throughout the Han tribe. That makes sense, but 300 meters, that's nearly a third of a mile. Who has telescopic vision? Just as the crowd was grumbling, a young man of 17 or 18 spoke up. That's not necessarily true. Seeing all eyes turn to him, he explained calmly. When we're planting rice seedlings, the fields are flat and wide open. You can see one the pockmarked from the east end of the village slacking off several plots away. That distance has to be more than 300 meters, right? Of course, that's on flat ground. If you're in a forest, you wouldn't be able to see far even if you were a god. His words left everyone stunned. He's right. Put that way, it actually made sense. Seeing a person at 300 meters is just like watching an actor on stage from the back of the theater, isn't it? You can definitely see them. It wasn't as if they were asking you to count the freckles on a man's face. As long as you could confirm it was a living, moving thing, that should be enough. Hey, if you put it like that, it doesn't sound so hard after all. It was never that hard to begin with. The scholar who had analyzed it earlier chimed in. You all can mull it over. I have to hurry back and tell my wife. I'm claiming one of those spots. With that, the young man shouldered his hoe and, amidst a sea of chatter, marched home with his head held high. For common folk like them, uneducated and with no skills beyond farming and raising children, joining the army was the only way out. It was the only highway to titles, status, and wealth. If they missed this chance, who knew when the next one would come? In an instant, the entire Qianzhou County was in an uproar. On the day the notice was posted, the number of applicants exceeded 50. The next day, it broke 200. Nearly every eligible young man rushed to the government office as if possessed. But there were only 40 spots. With so many contenders and so few positions, the government had no choice but to raise the bar, kicking off a super soldier audition. First round, the vision test. 300 meters? A piece of cake. These farmers, who spent their days toiling in the fields, had eyes sharper than eagles. The officials saw this wasn't effectively thinning the herd. So, they increased the distance to 400, then 500 meters, and even had the target wear different colored clothes to increase the difficulty. Instantly, the 200-plus applicants were whittled down to about 150. Second round, the physical fitness assessment. No fancy tricks, just running. They ran laps around the county town. The first to collapse was eliminated. After one round, the number dropped to below 100. Third round, the background check. This was meticulous. The government sent people to visit every household, inquiring about everything down to how many bones a family's dog had stolen from the neighbor. After this round, only 80 remained. Finally, the most crucial round, archery. On the archery range, 80 fine men drew their bows. In the end, only the top 40 with the highest scores would receive the coveted enlistment notice. The chosen 40 were so overjoyed they wept, happier than if they had won the top scholar prize. When the enlistment notices and the first month's military pay were delivered into their hands, many of the new recruits were baffled. We haven't even gone to the battlefield. Why are they already giving us money? After asking, they learned that a soldier's salary was paid in advance. This month, you received next month's pay. This system was, in effect, a stark message. Once you take this money, your life belongs to the tribe. You might not live to collect the next month's pay. If you're afraid to die, don't take it. Clutching the heavy copper coins, the new recruits felt a mix of emotions. Getting paid meant their families could live securely, which was a good thing. But it was also like a silent countdown, reminding them that they were about to head to a battlefield where survival was anything but guaranteed. In just 4 days, Weishan Commandery's recruitment was successfully completed. It was the same across all 8 northern commanderies of Hanyang, with astonishing efficiency. In the 3 southern commanderies of the Grasslands and Honghu, the recruitment process was even simpler and more direct. The herdsmen there had the genes of warriors flowing in their blood. The moment they heard the recruitment order, they howled like hungry wolves that had spotted meat and rushed to sign up. In less than 3 days, 600 new recruits were assembled. They first gathered in Kaiyuan Commandery, then boarded a small flying fish clipper, riding the wind and waved straight for Hanyang Commandery in the north. Voiceover, from open auditions to background checks. This recruitment process is stricter than a modern civil service exam. Luo Chong is trying to build a special forces unit of straight-A students. Good vision, good fitness, and good character. Especially that slick move of paying the salary in advance. It's pure psychological mastery. A carrot in one hand, a death warrant in the other, instantly maxing out the new recruit's loyalty and will to fight. This Eagle Eye Legion has already won at the starting line before even setting foot on the battlefield. For the herdsmen of the Grasslands, a trip to the Han tribe's heartland, Hanyang Commandery, was more sacred than any pilgrimage. They had seen Luo Chong in person, but they had never seen the homeland of this godlike chieftain, had never imagined what kind of earthly paradise it might be. Just to broaden their horizons and gain some experience, it was worth being a soldier. As for dying on the battlefield, what man of the Grasslands didn't live with a blade at his throat every day? They were used to it. In contrast, the recruitment in the southern Tuahai Commandery was something of a mixed blessing. It wasn't that no one signed up, but that far too many people did. Several hundred men vied for 200 spots. The initial selection alone took 3 days and 3 nights. The lucky ones who made it through were packed onto a northbound flying fish clipper the very next day, heading straight for Hanyang Commandery to assemble. While the new recruits from all over were still being tossed about on their journey, Chu Bing in Riyang Commandery had already married his bride with great fanfare. The wedding was a grand affair. It couldn't be helped. He was the chieftain's personal appointee, the designated commander of the new elite guard, and his family owned the only photo studio in the entire Han tribe. The young man was, simply put, the most eligible bachelor in the Han tribe, a walking blue-chip stock. The wedding night, naturally, was a fiery and passionate affair. Chu Bing knew perfectly well that he had to leave behind an heir before setting out on the expedition. It was the rule. Although it was a bit late to be starting, with a little effort, there was still hope of his wife conceiving. As for whether it would be a boy or a girl, that was up to fate. Chu Bing had been a groom for less than a week when he was summoned to the barracks by a transfer order from Luo Chong. However, Luo Chong wasn't completely unreasonable. He gave him special permission to take 1 day off a week to go home and try for an heir. The barracks of the Divine Strategy Guard were located in the forbidden zone of man-eating trees in the back mountains of Hanyang Commandery. The place was large enough and secluded enough. As soon as the new recruits arrived, Chu Bing, along with 200 instructors borrowed from Luo Chong's personal guard, the Jinwu Guard, led them in felling trees and setting up camp. Time was tight and the task was heavy, so the barracks were kept simple. It was summer, so they made do with tents. Earthen-walled houses for shelter from the wind and rain were also being built at a rapid pace. Half a month later, the 600 new herdsman recruits from the southern grasslands finally arrived at the docks of Weishan Commandery. Before the ship had even fully docked, they were stunned by the sight before them. My heavens! Rows of gantry cranes, like iron behemoths, were effortlessly lifting tons of coke from the ships, and, with a crash, accurately dumping it into the black, gleaming freight cars of a train on the shore. And that tall, white lighthouse that reached into the clouds. Although it was daytime and the light wasn't on, its sheer presence was enough to inspire awe. All of you, line up. We'll rest at the train station for an hour. Go to the latrine if you need to, buy things if you want, but no wandering around. Yes. Big brother, where's the toilet? I can't hold it anymore. This group of country bumpkins, fresh off the boat, were herded into the Weishan Commandery train station in a daze, under the scolding of their officers and the guidance of the station staff. The station hall was spacious and bright, with gray brick floors and neat rows of long benches. The herdsmen had never seen such a sight. Like rustics in a great city for the first time, they gaped at everything, no one thinking to sit down. When they heard that the station canteen was open to them for free, they let out a howl and swarmed in. They had been gnawing on dry rations on the ship for a week, and their palates were numb. In the canteen, there were steaming hot buns, rice, steamed bread, dumplings, and fragrant egg drop soup and mutton soup. Green beans, cabbage, tofu, stir-fried mutton, vegetables, and soy products that were as rare as gold on the grasslands were available here in unlimited quantities. The herdsmen's eyes nearly popped out of their heads. Holding their trays, they were frozen with indecision. Take as much as you can eat. No wasting, or you'll be punished by military law. A shout from the canteen chef finally pulled them back from their culinary fantasy. Voiceover. From the grasslands to the docks, this group of new herdsman recruits experienced a culture shock that could be described as time travel. Luo Chong's infrastructure display was more effective than any recruitment drive. First, he bombards your vision with steel behemoths and modern docks. Then he captures your stomach with a free, all-you-can-eat buffet. After this 1-2 punch, forget fighting cannibals. If you asked them to patch a hole in the sky, these herdsmen would probably be fighting to be first in line. The perks were just too good to be true. These herdsmen, who had known little but hardship, had frugality etched into their very bones. Even without being told, they would never waste a single grain of rice. However, seeing so many different kinds of stir-fried dishes for the first time, and being a group of young men in their prime with appetites that could put a pack of wolves to shame, they naturally rolled up their sleeves and ate until their bellies were round. They squatted at the entrance of the canteen, shoveling rice into their mouths while curiously observing the long steel dragon still being loaded on the tracks outside. Hey, why is this called a train station? Does it have something to do with that iron beast over there? I don't know. Why don't we have these on the grasslands? What else could it be for? Didn't you see people pouring things from the ship into that cart just now? It must be for hauling goods. My heavens, this thing is so long. It must be as long as several ships put together. How many oxen and horses would it take to pull it? Just as the crowd was chattering, a deafening roar suddenly split the air. Woo woo woo. A locomotive, a large red flower hanging from its front, spewing thick black smoke and steam like a waking beast, slowly approached the station. The new recruits who witnessed this were so shocked that the food fell from their mouths. My goodness. This thing, it moves on its own. Now, no one could be bothered to eat. They all craned their necks, their eyes wide, staring intently at the slowly approaching steam train. Some even excitedly rushed back into the canteen to call their companions out to see the monster. Woo woo. The train sounded its whistle and slowly pulled into the station. Only then did the new recruits see clearly that this train was pulling more than a dozen empty passenger cars. Heavens, this train is so long. It must be several hundred meters, right? Why does it move by itself? There are no oxen or horses, and no one is pushing it. Could it be this iron beast is alive? Don't be ridiculous. I think this thing is a fire cart. A cart that runs on fire. Didn't you see the smoke coming out of its head? Just as the new recruits' imaginations were running wild, their commanding officer walked over, cleared his throat, and with the self-satisfied air of one in the know, explained, "That's right. This is our tribe's train. It runs on coal, and one train can carry more goods than several ships combined. It's known as the land ship. Currently, this is the only line in the entire Han tribe." Wow, Captain, you're amazing. Have you ridden on it? A group of new recruits immediately cast looks of admiration at him. Ahem. The captain smiled awkwardly. I've only heard about it. But we're about to write it. The official who received us just now said that after we finish eating, we're taking this to the barracks. Really? We can ride it too. My heavens. Will our oxen and horses still be valuable in the future? The herdsman's thinking instantly jumped from novelty to livelihood. That's right, with fast boats on the water and trains on land. What use were the oxen and horses they depended on for a living? What are you thinking? The captain quickly moved to reassure them. You need oxen to plow the fields, don't you? The cavalry needs horses, right? At the very least, they can still produce milk, meat, and hides. Don't worry, they won't become obsolete. Finally, pulling the men's attention back to the train, the captain breathed a sigh of relief and turned to find the station clerk to confirm the departure time. Before long, preparations were complete. All of you, in rows of 10, prepare to board. The new recruits quickly lined up on the platform, their faces flushed with excitement. This was a train ride. They could brag about this for the rest of their lives. Board from car number 7. 50 men per car. Anyone who dares to cut in line will have to run alongside the train. Yes. The new recruits filed in, only to be stunned when they entered the car. It was empty inside, without a single seat. However, they quickly came to terms with it. Weren't the Han tribe's four-wheeled carriages just large carts where everyone sat on the floor? This train was probably the same. It was very much in keeping with the Han tribe's ethos of being sturdy and practical. So, everyone followed suit, leaning against the car walls and sitting on the floor. Even their captain, after a moment's hesitation, sat down with a plop. After all, it was his first time seeing this marvel too. Voiceover. From being dumbstruck to experiencing it firsthand, this group of new herdsman recruits' first train experience was a grand drama of magical realism. Luo Chong's move was not just a show of force, but also a subtle form of indoctrination. As they sat on this steel behemoth, feeling its raw power, the sense of identity and pride they felt for the Han tribe was likely more powerful than the steam from the locomotive itself. The sight of the strapping herdsmen sitting cross-legged on the floor nearly made the station clerk and train crew double over with laughter. Ahem. The clerk cleared his throat, struggling to contain his amusement. He pointed to the carriage wall. Gentlemen, the seats are right there. See those wooden planks? You just fold them down. He even demonstrated, pulling one down with a thud. Only then did everyone understand. A wave of crimson embarrassment washed over the men. They had made complete fools of themselves. Why didn't you say so earlier? The commanding officer grumbled. My apologies, the clerk hastily explained. This is a dual-use passenger and freight car. It's normally used for cargo, so the seats are folded up against the wall. This is a newly dispatched, empty train. With a long blast of its whistle, the train gave a lurch, and the steel behemoth finally began to move. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through the new recruits in the carriage. They pressed their faces to the windows, their shouts of wonder echoing within the car. This thing is incredible. 50 people in one car, and there's still so much empty space in the middle. Imagine how much cargo it could hold. It's incredible. Our tribe is truly blessed by the gods. Just the ability to forge carts from iron is a skill other tribes couldn't master in 100 years. That's a given. Forget building them. They couldn't even gather this much iron. As they chatted, the topic drifted to their impending military careers. Hey brothers, what kind of weapons do you think our divine strategy guard will get? They have to be better than what the regular garrison soldiers have, right? Maybe cannons. Cannons. I doubt it. But how can you fight those monsters without them? There must be. We're the chieftain's personal guard. It would be an embarrassment not to have a few cannons for show. Clack, clack, clack. The train chugged merrily along the tracks, picking up speed. Look outside. This thing. It's faster than a horse, a new recruit suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked, and it was true. The scenery outside was flying backward at a dizzying pace. This speed, this carrying capacity, completely conquered these men from the grasslands. Their reverence for the Han tribe deepened into something akin to worship. The train journey was uneventful, and they arrived in Xinfeng Commandery that evening. The new recruits rested for a night, and the next day began their march on foot, crossing mountains and ridges, finally arriving at the Divine Strategy Guard's garrison in the mountains north of Hanyang Commandery at dusk. By this time, 2,200 new recruits had already gathered in the camp, with only the 200 from the farthest Tuahai Commandery yet to arrive. The next day, the contingent from Tuahai Commandery also arrived. They brought not only men, but also dozens of horse-drawn carts loaded with wooden crates. The crates were crudely made, as if hastily nailed together, with a few lines stenciled on their sides in dark green paint. Standard Rifle X10, Standard Model 1 Shotgun X10, Standard Model 1 shotgun short. X20. The new recruits looked at these boxes, their heads full of questions. Hey, brother, are those spears in the boxes? They seem awfully short. I've seen the spears of the garrison army. They're over 3 meters long. Exactly. Are we supposed to fight monsters in close combat with such short weapons? There must be some mistake.